control now, and because we had the breakup rooms, let's say that we had a short break, because we are a little bit late, and I'm sure all of us are waiting for the moment already promoted on our website and media. Our keynote address today opens up with a question that is playful but also very profound. Is love a Jewish idea? Our keynote speaker, Alexis Nouss, is a professor emeritus of general and comparative literature at Marseille University, with previous positions at Cardiff University and the University of Montreal. He has lectured internationally and founded key research initiatives as POEXIL and the Cardiff Research Group on the politics of translating, and is currently affiliated with the CIELAM in Marseille. I prepared a little bit of a reflection on that, but because we're very late and I'm very curious and intrigued by this question, I'm sure Mr. Nouss will not give you an answer. This is not what we do in Jewish tradition, necessarily find answers, but definitely he will guide us into how to explore various questions related to this, and why not we will be enriched for sure with new ways of speaking of love to our audience this autumn. Professor Nouss, do I see you? Yes. I'm so happy that you're here with us. Thank you so much. And I'm giving you control over this question. What shall we think of it?
Thanks, Alina. Could you hear me? Yeah. Many thanks for your trust and for this invitation and for the challenge it represents. Although, isn't love always a challenge? Is love a Jewish idea? I have to confess that the previous workshop from the NU Museum already gave many answers. Anyway, why do I ask the question? And why in those terms? Why an idea? Before trying to answer, from the start, I want to say that I found not only challenging, but unsettling the very choice of the theme of love, when since October 7, 2023, love won't be the notion which comes into mind when one thinks about the relationship between the Jewish community and the rest of the world. Talking about love when everybody seems to hate us could be perceived as provocation indeed. Furthermore, within the Jewish community, antagonistic, violent debates are raging. People don't agree on the war in Gaza, the war in Lebanon, don't agree on West Bank territories, on the causes of anti-Semitism, on the way to address the issue, and so on. Well, because of such a tense situation, it could be in the end a good thing to talk about love, not as a provocation, but as a resistance. And resistance is indeed a very Jewish idea. Now, love as a Jewish idea, why do I use the term idea? Love is a feeling, an emotion, belonging to a sensual and psychological reality, not an intellectual one. Well, I don't think it's as straightforward. First, love as an idea. What I mean is that love, as any other human feeling, is framed within cultural representations. Human feelings are certainly based on instincts, as we are animal beings, but precisely as human beings, that is, as cultural beings, beings using a mediation, which is culture, a mediation between themselves and the world, and between themselves altogether. As cultural beings, our feelings are filtered, are shaped through cultural representations. For instance, the motherly feeling is universal, mothers all over the world. This feeling of motherhood is shared all over the world and shared with animals as well. But the sense of motherhood is linked to specific cultural settings. The understanding of the duties involved by being a mother and how those duties should be performed, such an understanding will not be the same, say, in the Western world, in Africa, or in Asia. Furthermore, and to give an example related to our Jewish experience, the sense of motherhood or of parenthood for Jews in a poor shtetl, in a rich European or American city, or in a kibbutz, it's not the same. That is motherhood or parenthood are ideas which have been understood differently according to different historical and social situations. Jewish children could stay at home or be sent away, could be raised by their parents, by other family members, or even in other families. With regard to love, as far as Western culture is concerned, love, in our common understanding, love between two persons, romantic love, doesn't appear before the medieval era. In antiquity, love between human beings is an impulse to be suspicious of. Friendship is considered a better relationship, even an ideal one. And Christianity went the same way. Love wasn't loved. The only love to be respected was the one toward God or toward gods. It's only around the 12th century that the idea of love came up at the human level. Love between human beings as a value in itself. The secular idea of love, which modernity will develop. The same way a word could have different meanings, a feeling does receive different interpretation and therefore could be experienced in different ways. Judaism is certainly not different. The idea of love in Judaism is specific, and the very Jewish idea of love does receive different meanings. It's an idea translating itself into several ideas. I receive a strong support from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, chapter of the Fathers, which says, all love that depends on something, when the thing stops, love stops. And all love that doesn't depend on anything will never cease. What is an example of love that depended on something? Such was the love of Amnon for Tamar. And what is an example of love that didn't depend on anything? Such was the love of David and Jonathan. This not depending on something is a useful definition of love as an idea. Let's begin with the beginning. Adam and Eve, the first couple. Did Adam love Chava? And did she love him? Not a single proof of that, not a single word on that. No wonder if their children behaved badly to the point of Cain killing Abel. They didn't have an example of love at home to be inspired by. The first mention in the Bible, the first mention of love comes with Abraham in Genesis 22, in relation with Isaac. And God said, please take your son, your only one, whom you love, Asher Ahavta, Isaac, and go away to the land of Moriah and bring him up there for a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. End of quote. The one you love. I bet Abraham loved Israel, having been waiting for so long to get a child with Sarah, when he had been promised a child and many, many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He has to wait for so long. So of course he loved Isaac, but it's a very self-interested love, and a love quite limited by the mitzvah he did receive from God. Then come Isaac and Rebekah, Yitzhak and Rivka. in a very arranged marriage, organized within family bonds by Eliezer, Abraham's servant. True, Isaac is mentioned as loving Rivka, but in a very strange way. Genesis 24. And Isaac brought her to the tent of Sarah, his mother, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted for the loss of his mother. End of quote. Is Freud needed here to give an interpretation? Once again, Isaac's love is a very limited love. Here limited by the memory of his mother, Jewish mother, as you know. Then we have to wait for Genesis 22, the story of Jacob and Rachel. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said to Laban, I will work for you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. But when for his wedding night, Leah was in his bed and not Rachel, he didn't discover the substitution before the morning. Love is blind, indeed, but the rest of the story shows that Jacob did willingly share his life between Rachel and Leah. Which kind of love is that? Those biblical love stories are certainly complex, and I'm not mentioning here more disturbing episodes like Noah and his daughters, Jacob and his brothers, or Yehuda and his daughter-in-law. One should also mention the relationship between David and Jonathan, and of course the erotic poem, which is Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. I do not want to be cynical. On the opposite, I think it's fair enough to say that in the Bible, love is considered as a complex issue and as a reality in life. Not an overall dimension of life, a reality within life. Love between human beings happens or not, but it is neither an ideal nor a goal, as in other spiritualities or in Western literary tradition. Love is sought after because it's a way to build a better world. I think that's a position reflected in the Talmudic text as well. I'm obliged to open a parenthesis here. By definition, Jewish thought is nourished by contradiction and oppositions, not to be resolved, but to be taken into account in an ongoing discussion. Therefore, it's quite risky to give general statements about Jewish culture, although I'm obliged to do so in a short talk like this one. In the Talmudic view, love is considered within social structure, the married couple providing a basic example. The Talmud in Yevamot connects explicitly love as found in marriage and shalom, understood as a life lived in harmony and respect. Rava Bar Ula said, one who doesn't have a wife is left without peace. As it is written, and you shall know that your tent is in peace, and you shall visit your habitation and shall miss nothing. Book of Job. This indicates that a man has peace only when he has a tent, that is, a wife. And further down, the page says, the sages taught, one who loves his wife as he loves himself, and who honors her more than himself, about him, the verse states, and you shall know that your tent is in peace. As a result of his action, there will be peace in his home, as it will be devoid of quarrel and sin. End of quote. Therefore, love brings peace. A life driven by love is what life is about, is what love is about. That is peace and harmony. The Talmud in Brachot takes a very cautious stand about the nature of love when it makes the distinction between Ahava Rabbah, abundant love, and Ahavat Olam, eternal love. The result came up with the blessings to be said before the Shema Israel, which, as you know, is repeated at night and in the morning. At night, in the context of God controlling nature and time, the blessing states Ahavat Olam, eternal love. But in the morning, in the context of creation and the gift of the Torah, the blessing goes for only an abundant love, as it, at human level, love couldn't be eternal. Another version of the same idea, a rather profane version, appears in Sanhedrin. There was a certain man who was saying about his marriage, when our love was strong, we could have slept on a bed that had the wideness of a sword. Now that our love is not that strong, a bed of 60 cubits is not sufficient for us. I let you appreciate the degree of irony or of truth in this declaration. And we're not talking about what the woman is feeling. God's eternal love, all right. But what could be the idea of love? Such a human idea, as we saw, limited and pragmatically oriented when applied to God. God defined by its infinity, its absoluteness. Let's remember that the Hebrew root for ahava, love, is ava, which means to give, implying an idea of dispossession rather than of possession. God, love, manifests itself in the act of giving. The Talmud in Menachot states that the proof that the Jewish people are beloved by God is that He surrounded them by the mitzvot, the concrete symbol of which being the tefillin and the mezuzah. But God choosing the Jewish people, is not that an expression of love? The answer is easy. It showed them for the sake of the whole world, of all the world nations, according to Isaiah 49, and He said, it is too late for you to be my servant, to establish the tribe of Jacob and to bring back the besieged of Israel, but I will make you a light of nations. Or Goyim, light of nations. The chosenness of the Jewish people is intended for the nation of the world as much as for the sake of Israel. Proof of that is a distribution of lands to other people, Eretz Israel for the Jews, but Edom received its own territories. So does the people of Moab. So does the people of Ammon. So do people far from Middle East regions. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. Ki beiti beit tefillah yikra lechol ha'amim, Isaiah 56. Although many commentators restrict all peoples to the converted individuals, but we cannot open the debate now. However, we have to think about this expression of love, house of prayer for all people. However, we find in Devarim, and you shall love the stranger, for you were stranger in the land of Egypt. The stranger is the only one to be loved in Devarim, in the book of Devarim, because he has a specific place in the Jewish view of the world. The stranger is needed in the global human plan leading to universal peace. Peace being precisely the coexistence of all the nations, of all the cultures, the Jews and the strangers. It's what Rabbi Jonathan Sachs calls integrated diversity, a universalism born out of exchanges and translation between culture, not by the imposition of one unique model. This could be another name for love, considered in a global perspective. In that sense, love is also a political idea. With regard to divine love, it should be noted that love doesn't appear in the so-called 13 attributes of mercy that we recite many times during the high holidays, a kind of self-definition that God gave to Moses after the episode of the golden calf, when God threatened to destroy the people of Israel rather than forgive them. The 13 attributes are pronounced as a way of praying for mercy and forgiveness. Hashem, Hashem, El Rachum, Ve'Ranun, Harei Rapayim, Ve'Had Chesed, Ve'emet. Hashem, Hashem, merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the thousandth generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and cleansing. Love is not part of the list of God's attributes. God didn't choose to present himself as a loving God, although in a famous verse in Yirmiyahu, the prophet says, "With everlasting love have I loved you, therefore I have drawn you to me with loving kindness. Ve'avat olam ahavticha, al ken meshirtir chesed." The verse is very precise. I loved you, but what you did receive was chesed. Chesed, usually translated as loving kindness, describes the way God acts toward the human beings with generosity, loyalty, gentleness. A crucial dialectics between love and chesed. Chesed being what we perceive of God's love, which otherwise remains beyond cognition and perception. The best example of God love chesed being the gift of the Torah. A Midrash Tanhuma on Sota, links explicitly the Torah, the giving of the Torah, and the notion of chesed. Deeds of loving kindness, of chesed, are mentioned at the beginning of the Torah, in its middle, and at its conclusion. At the beginning, when God gave clothes to Adam and Eve. At the middle, when he visits an ailing Avram, and at the end, when he buries Moshe in the valley of Moab. I should, however, mention one instance of God acting in pure love, an emotional love, the one of a Yiddish mama, of a Jewish mother. Last week, Parasha listed the annual holidays, the last of them being Shmini Atzeret, a Yom Tov without ritual, almost without content, if not marking the end of Sukkot. About it, a Midrash explained that it is as if God told the Jewish people, we have been together for a week in the intimacy of the Sukkah, so please say one more day for the sake of being together. Isn't that moving? Let's now tackle the most often quoted statement when it comes to love in Judaism. Before that, I wish to make a point. I don't want my talk to be understood as belonging to the debate Christianism is about love versus Judaism is about law and commandments. The Christian God is gentle, the Jewish God is harsh. It has been argued that the distinction coming from Christian voices has been internalized by Jews in order to precisely distinguish themselves from Christians. We are talking about ideology here. Enough to say that in the Jewish idea of love, the distinction doesn't hold, since the love for God is expressed through the practice of the mitzvot. Love is not separated from law, as illustrated in the first of these two notable statements we will assess now, two commandments, one, love God, and two, love your neighbor. By the way, let's note that there is a specific idea here that love could be a commandment, as opposed to the romantic idea of love as a free impulse. One, love God. You shall love your God. As we know, the sentence from Devarim is part of the quintessential Shema Israel. ואהבת את השם אלוקיך בכל לבבך וכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your means. All right, but how could I love a faceless, bodiless, imageless entity? I could love a landscape or a glass of wine, but at least they have an appearance. Could I love without an image toward which project my love? The answer is in the interpretation of the verse. Rashi gives a very pragmatic and somehow coldly illustration, a negative interpretation of this law. There are, he comments, two ways of serving God, out of love and out of fear. The first one is better since it doesn't depend on the task, while for serving out of fear, if the task is too heavy, the servant will go away. Heart, soul, and means are symbolizing such service out of love. In other terms, God is here putting forward his self-interest when God is talking about love. As interesting is Rashi's interpretation of the following verse. דהו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך. And this word which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. And Rashi asked, what is this love referred in the previous verse? And he answered, it is that these words, advarim, are the mitzvot. They shall be upon your heart. And through this you will come to recognize the Holy One. According to Rashi, the required love to have in one's heart is nothing else than the mitzvot, which, like duties, should be integrated in one's heart. On this statement, the Talmud in Brachot explained that with all your heart implies that such love should be expressed with both the human being's good inclination and the human being bad inclination. Rashi confirms it in connection with the two letters, the two bet in Levavcha, when one was enough. To love with your bad inclination. We are very far from a romantic definition of love as pure goodness, but close to a correct consideration of psychological realities which Freud, again, won't deny. Love is not always pure, but in the case of love for God, even the impurity could be redirected toward a divine purpose. If the Talmud does establish a hierarchy between the mitzvot performed out of love and the one out of fear, it does admit both. It states in Sota, what difference is there between one who performs mitzvot out of love and one who performs mitzvot out of fear? Rabbi Shimon ben Eliezer say, greater is the one who performs mitzvot out of love than the one who performs mitzvot out of fear. As with regard to this one who acts out of fear, his merits endure for 1,000 generations. But with regard to that one who serves God out of love, his merits endure for 2,000 generations. But both are merited. And the same page in the Talmud goes on by mentioning two students of Chava, named by him sages, but one serving God out of love and the other one out of fear. Finally, the Talmud in Yoma proposes another understanding of the commandment of love. To love God means to have his name beloved by studying and behaving honestly in matter of business. The last point implying that love with regard to God did not only concern God and the individual, but would include other people as well. Loving God, in other terms, is not strictly a personal matter. Second famous statement about love, love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. The central principle, Klal Gadol, of the whole Torah, according to Rabbi Akiva, and the essence of Torah, according to Hillel, in a different version, what's hateful to you, do not do to another. But loving oneself cannot be love in the common understanding, because it would amount at pure narcissism. It has to be interpreted as taking care of other people as one takes care of oneself, as one takes care of oneself. That is what the exact wording states. You shall neither take revenge from, nor bear resentment against a member of your people. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Ve'afta lereacha, le reacha, and not at reacha. the normal grammatical construction. This lamed before reacha means one should understand this love directed toward the neighbor, not at him or her. Not to love your neighbor, but to love toward your neighbor. Not directly him or her, but what surrounds him or her. His or her belongings, according to some interpretation, what is good for him, according to Ibn Ezra, his or her reputation, and his or her money, according to Maimonides. Now, the statement is only the second half of the verse. The first half says, you shall not take vengeance or bear resentment against member of your people. And this commandment ends in the three previous verses, a list of commandments aiming at preserving justice and welfare within the community. Therefore, the love expressed in verse 18 is connected to a social order rather than being an emotional one. To love another one, like oneself, and to express it through concrete action. There is an example in the book of Samuel, where it said, Jonathan and David made a pact because Jonathan loved him as himself, like his own soul. Jonathan, son of Saul, will protect David against Saul's anger. I say that love your neighbor commandment aimed at preserving justice and welfare within the community, but a few verses further in the same chapter 19, one finds, the strangers who reside with you shall be to you as your citizen. You shall love each one as yourself, for you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. Love the stranger as yourself because you have been yourself strangers. Jews and non-Jews here are united in this commandment of love, understood as a concern for social order, for peace. Now, does this commandment apply to the enemies of the Jewish people? What is the extension of the commandment? The whole humanity? The Midrash answers, you shall not take revenge and you shall not bear resentment against the children of your people, but you may take revenge of and bear a resentment against the ones who worship idols. That is, thus being outside the covenant and even against the covenant. The love process, which illustrate a peace process, those are simply not concerned. One doesn't have to love them since they are not included in the peace process. I tried to trace back the evolution of the Jewish idea of love, rather the Jewish ideas of love, during the long period from antiquity to the Middle Age, when the Jewish way of thinking has been elaborated and expanded. It should be necessary to explore how this idea of love has transformed itself later on through theological texts, as well as in Jewish philosophy, Jewish literature, and popular culture. No time for that today. I shall simply say that after this too brief overview, it seems that in the Jewish idea of love, the term is more understood and used as a verb than as a noun, loving being more significant than love. However, I would like to conclude this talk with Leonard Cohen as an example of a contemporary Jewish take on love. Jewish because Leonard Cohen has always claimed that all his inspiration came from his Jewishness and that he was writing and composing and singing out of his tradition. Why Leonard Cohen on love? Because many of his poems and songs deal with the theme of love. Let's remember that its third album, released in 1971, was entitled Songs of Love and Hate. Two remarks. The love theme is mostly played on the side of unhappy love, ending love stories, separation, unfulfilled desires, and so on. And secondly, like in Shir HaShirim, the line is very thin between the expression of love for somebody and the expression of love for God. My final example, the song Dance Me to the End of Love, with its klezmerish tune. About the line, Dance me to your beauty with a burning violin, Leonard Cohen said that the inspiration for the song came from the knowledge that in the Nazi camps, there were small orchestra playing classical music while people were sent to the gas chambers. Hence, the burning violin. Love in the death camps? Love for who? The whole psychological climate was one of survival. Still, we know of many examples where love was certainly a motivating factor, a parent sacrificing himself or herself to save a child, somebody sharing a piece of bread to help somebody else to go on just another day. What those examples are showing is that if love was a motivating factor, it was so in order to defend life, the right of life to exist in a kingdom of death. And I believe that if there is a Jewish idea of love, it stands in this connection between love and life. Love is not essentially about two human beings, or between human beings and God, or between God and the Jewish people. Love is most and foremost both an expression and a symbol of life, and love between human beings and God, love between God and the Jewish people are manifestation of what one could now call love of life. In a Jewish perspective, love is love of life. It doesn't exist in itself. It is secondary to life. It reveals life. In the Talmud, to encourage a student to enjoy life, to eat and drink, Shmuel told his students, and it was Rav Yehuda, this world should be like a wedding feast, a celebration of love to mean a celebration of life. I said at the beginning that there was not any kind of love story happening between Adam and Eve. However, the fifth of the Sheva Brachot, the seven blessings said during the Jewish wedding ceremony and after the festive meals during the next 7 days, the fifth bracha refers to Adam and Eve. Grant abundant joy to these loving companions, Reim Ahuvim, as you granted joys to your created beings in the garden of old. Blessed are you, Lord, who grant joy to the groom and bride. Baruch atah Hashem, v'sameach chatan v'kala. The groom and bride are presented as Reim Ahuvim. Reim, the plural of Reah, as in Ve'ahavta le'reacha, love your neighbor. Those two persons in love are referred to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. That is the source of human life, which Adam and Eve are the symbols of. Not symbols of love, but symbols of life. That means love is in direct connection to life. Furthermore, the following blessing, the sixth blessing, blesses the one who created joy and happiness, groom and bride, gladness, jubilation, cheer and delight, love, friendship, brotherhood, peace and fellowship. Love as a creation. Love is a divine creation offered to human beings in order to celebrate life. The idea of love is not a value in itself, but one of the diverse paths human beings could take in order to sanctify life. In Shir HaShirim 8, the verse say, Ki aza kamavet ahava. Love is as strong as death. And not as often and wrongly quoted, love is stronger than death. A most surprising statement. What does love have to do with death? If the verse would have been, love is stronger than death, there would be a kind of equivalence. But the verse says, Ki azar kemavet ahava. Love is as strong as death, which states not an equivalence, but an analogy. First interpretation, death is forever, so is love. Second interpretation, death doesn't end love. In the Talmud, characters could interact with their beloved deceased ones, a recurrent theme in Yiddish folklore as well. We know that in our life. Love continues after the death of the beloved ones. Why? Because love is bound to life. To borrow a term from the science of schmatas, Love is a lining of life, or if you will, it's a symbol against all odds. It's an idea, but in Judaism, ideas are as strong as death. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. We urgently feel the desire to clap our hands as in a in a conference room.